Hello. No. Hi. Hello to my audience. I am going to be reading the 8th remove of this story. It's called Miss Rowlandson. I'm at the top right now. This is a copy of the actual book, accounting for captivity, sufferings, and each remove in this story is basically when the speaker moves around. She is being held captive currently. I have read the 1st to the 7th, and that's why I'm starting on the 8th remove, which might be inconvenient, but I don't want to reread it. This is a homework assignment, and I thought it might be helpful to maybe somebody in the world to not have to read the 8th to the 20th themselves. So, okay, here we go. The 8th remove. On the narrow morning we must go over Connecticut River to meet with King Philip. 2 canoes full they had carried over. The next turn myself was to go, but as my foot was upon the canoe to step in, there was a sudden outcry among them, and I must step back, and instead of going over the river, I must go 4 or 5 miles up the river, farther northward. Some of the Indians ran one way and some another. The cause of this route was, as I thought, their spying some English scouts who were thereabouts. In this travel up the river about noon the company made a stop, and sat down, some to eat and others to rest them. As I sat amongst them, musing on some things past, my son Joseph unexpectedly came to me. We asked of each other welfare, bemoaning our doleful condition and the change that had come upon us. We had husband and father and children and sisters and friends and relations and house and home and many comforts of this life, but now we might say as Job, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I asked him whether he would read. He told me he earnestly desired it. I gave him my Bible, and he lighted upon that comfortable scripture. Psalm 118, 17, 18. I shall not die but live, and declare the works of the Lord. The Lord hath chastened me sore, yet he hath not given me over to death. Look here, mother, says he, did you read this? And here I may take occasion to mention one principal ground of my setting forth these lines, even the psalmists say, to declare the works of the Lord and his wonderful power in carrying us along, preserving us in the wilderness while under the enemy's hand, and the returning of us in safety again, and his goodness in bringing to my hand so many comfortable and suitable scriptures in my distress. But to return, we traveled on till night, and in the morning we must go over the river to Philip's crew. When I was in the canoe, I could not but be amazed at the numerous crew of pagans that were on the bank on the other side. When I came ashore, they gathered all about me, I sitting alone in the midst. I observed they asked one another questions, and laughed and rejoiced over their gains and victories. Then my heart began to fail, and I fell a-weeping, which was the first time to my remembrance that I wept before them. Although I had met with so much affliction, and my heart was so many times ready to break, yet I could not shed one tear in their sight, but rather had been all this time in amaze, and like one astonished. But now I may say, as Saul, 137:1, by the river of Babylon, there we sat down. We wept when we remembered Zion. There one of them asked me why I wept. I could hardly tell what to say, yet I answered they would kill me. No, said he, none will hurt you. Then came one of them and gave me 2 spoonfuls of meal to comfort me, and another gave me half a pint of peas, which was worth more than many bushels at another time. Then I went to see King Philip. He bid me to come in and sit down, and asked me whether I would smoke it. a usual compliment nowadays among the saints and sinners, but this no ways suited me. For though I had formerly used tobacco, yet I had left it ever since I was first taken. It seems to be a bait that devil lays to make men lose their precious time. I remember with shame how formerly when I had taken 2 or 3 pipes, I was presently ready for another. Such a bewitching thing it is. But I thank God he has now given me power over it. Surely there are many who may be better employed than to sit sucking a stinking tobacco pipe. Now the Indians gathered their forces to go against Northampton. Overnight one went about yelling and hooting to give notice of the design, whereupon they went to boiling of groundnuts and patching corn, as many as had it, for their provision, and in the morning away they went. During my abode in this place, Philip spake to me to make a shirt for his boy, which I did, for which he gave me a shilling. I offered the money to my mistress, but she bid me keep it, and with it I bought a piece of horse flesh. Afterward he asked me to make a cap for his boy, for which he invited me to dinner. I went, and he gave me a pancake, about as big as 2 fingers. It was made of parched wheat, beaten and fried in bear's grease, but I thought I never tasted pleasanter meat in my life. There was a squaw who spake to me to make a shirt for her sannup, for which she gave me a piece of beef. Another asked me to knit a pair of stockings, for which she gave me a quart of peas. I boiled my peas and beef together, and invited my master and mistress to dinner. But the proud gossip, because I served them both in one dish, would eat nothing, except one bit that he gave her upon the point of his knife. Hearing that my son was come to this place, I went to see him and found him lying flat on the ground. I asked him how he could sleep so. He answered me that he was not asleep, but at prayer, and that he lay so, that they might not observe what he is doing. I pray God he may remember these things, how he is returned in safety. At this place, the sun now getting higher, what with the beams and heat of the sun and the smoke of the wigwams, I thought I should have been blinded. I could scarce discern one wigwam from another. There was one Mary Thurston of Medfield, who, seeing how it was with me, lent me a hat to wear, but as soon as I was gone, the squaw that owned that Mary Thurston came running after me, and got it away again. Here was a squaw who gave me a spoonful of meal. I put it in my pocket to keep it safe, yet notwithstanding somebody stole it, but put 5 Indian corns in the room of it, which corns were the greatest provision I had in my travel for one day. The Indians returning from Northampton brought with them some horses and sheep and other things which they had taken. I desired them that they would carry me to Albany upon one of the horses and sell me for powder, for so they had sometimes discoursed. I was utterly helpless of getting home on foot, the way that I came. I could hardly bear to think of the many weary steps I had taken to this place. The 9th Remove. But instead of either going to Albany or homeward, we must go 5 miles up the river and then go over it. Here we abode a while. Here lived a sorry Indian who spake to me to make him a shirt when I had done it. He would pay me nothing for it, but he living by the riverside, where I often went to fetch water, I would often be putting him in mind and calling for my pay. At last he told me if I would make another shirt for a papoose of his, he would give me a knife, which he did when I had done it. I carried the knife in, and my master asked me to give it to him, and I was not a little glad that I had anything that they would accept of and be pleased with. When we were at this place, my master's maid came home. She had been gone 3 weeks into the Narragansett country to fetch corn, where they had stored up some in the ground. She brought home a peck and a half of corn. This was about the time that their great captain Nawanto was killed in the Narragansett country. My son being now about a mile from me, I asked liberty to go and see him. They bid me go, and away I went, but quickly lost myself traveling over hills and through swamps, and could not find the way to him. And I cannot but admire at the wonderful power and goodness of God to me, in that though I was gone from home and met with all sorts of Indians and those I had no knowledge of, and there being no Christian soul near me, yet not one of them offered the least imaginable miscarriage to me. I turned homeward again and met with my master, and he showed me the way to my son. When I came to him, I found him not well, and withal he had a boil on his side, which much troubled him. We bemoaned one another a while, as the Lord helped us, and then I returned again. When I was returned, I found myself as unsatisfied as I was before. I went up and down mourning and lamenting, and my spirit was ready to sink with the thoughts of my poor children. My son was ill, and I could not but think of his mournful looks, having no Christian friend near him to do any office of love to him, either for soul or body. And my poor girl, I knew not where she was, nor whether she was sick or well, alive or dead. I repaired under these thoughts to my Bible, my great comforter in that time, and that scripture came to my hand. Cast thy burthen upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. Psalm 55:22. But I was fain to go look after something to satisfy my hunger, and going among the wigwams, I went into one, and there found a squaw who shewed himself very kind to me, and gave me a piece of bear. I put it into my pocket, and came home, but could not find an opportunity to broil it, for fear they should get it from me, and there it lay all day and night in my stinking pocket. In the morning I went again to the same squaw who had a kettle of groundnuts boiling. I asked her to let me boil my piece of bear in the kettle, which she did, and gave me some groundnuts to eat it with, and I cannot but think how pleasant it was to me. I have sometimes seen bear-baked hand somali amongst the English, and some liked it, but the thoughts that it was bear made me tremble. But now that was savory to me, that one would think was enough to turn the stomach of a brute creature. One bitter cold day I could find no room to sit down before the fire. I went out and could not tell what to do, but I went into another wigwam, where they were also sitting around the fire. But the squaw laid a skin for me, and bid me sit down, and gave me some groundnuts, and bid me come again, and told me they would buy me if they were able, and yet these were strangers to me that I never knew before. The 10th Remove. That day a small part of the company removed about 3/4 of a mile, intending farther the next day. When they came to the place where they intended to lodge, and had pitched their wigwams, being hungry, I went again back to the place we were before at, to get something to eat, being encouraged by the squaw's kindness, who bid me come again. When I was there came an Indian to look after me, who, when he had found me, kicked me all along. I went home and found venison roasting that night, but they would not give me one bit of it. Sometimes I met with favor, and sometimes with nothing but frowns. The 11th Remove. The next day in the morning, they took their travel, intending a day's journey up the river. I took my load at my back, and quickly we came to wade over a river, and passed over tiresome and wearisome hills. One hill was so steep that I was fain to creep up upon my knees, and to hold by the twigs and bushes to keep myself from falling backward. My head also was so light that I usually reeled as I went, but I hope all those wearisome steps that I have taken are but a forwarding of me to the heavenly rest. I know, O Lord, that thy judgments are right, and that thou in faithfulness baft afflicted me. Psalm 119:75. The 12th Remove. It was upon a Sabbath day morning that they prepared for their travel. This morning I asked my master whether he would sell me to my husband. He answered nux, which did much rejoice my spirit. My mistress, before we went, was gone to the burial of a papoose, and returning she found me sitting and reading in my Bible. She snatched it hastily out of my hand and threw it out the doors. I ran out and catched it up, and put it in my pocket, and never let her see it afterwards. Then they packed up their things to be gone, and gave me my load. I complained it was too heavy, whereupon she gave me a slap on the face, and bid me be gone. I lifted up my heart to God, hoping that redemption was not far off, and the rather because their insolence grew worse and worse. But thoughts of my going homeward, for so we bent our course, much cheered my spirit, and made my burden seem light and almost nothing at all. But to my amazement and great perplexity, the scale was soon turned, for when we had got a little way, on a sudden my mistress gave out she would go no further, but turned back again, and said I must go back again with her, and she called her Sanop, and would have had him go back also, but he would not, but said he would go on and come to us again in 3 days. My spirit was upon this, I confess, very impatient and almost outrageous. I thought I could as well have died as went back. I cannot declare the trouble that I was in about it. Back again I must go. As soon as I had an opportunity, I took my Bible to read, and that quieting scripture came to my hand, Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God, which stilled my spirit for the present, but a sore time of trial I concluded I had to go through. My master being gone, who seemed to me the best friend I had of an Indian, both in cold and hunger, and quickly so it proved. Down I sat with my heart as full as it could hold, and yet so hungry that I could not sit neither, but going out to see what I could find, and walking among the trees I found 6 acorns and 2 chestnuts, which were some refreshment to me. Towards the night I gathered me some sticks for my own comfort, that I might not lie a cold. But when we came to lie down, they bid me go out and lie somewhere else, for they had company. They said, come in more than their own. I told them I could not tell where to go. They bid me go look. I told them if I went to another wigwam, they would be angry and send me home again. Then one of the company drew his sword and told me he would run me through if I did not go presently. Then was I fain to stoop to this rude fellow, and go out in the night, I knew not whither. Mine eyes hath seen that fellow afterwards walking up and down in Boston, under the appearance of a friendly Indian and several others of the like cut. I went to one wigwam, and they told me they had no room. Then I went to another, and they said the same. At last an old Indian bid me come to him, and his squaw gave me some groundnuts. She gave me also something to lay under my head, and a good fire we had. Through the good providence of God, I had a comfortable lodging that night. In the morning another Indian bid me come at night, and he would give me 6 groundnuts, which I did. We were at this place and time about 2 miles from Connecticut River. We went in the morning to gather groundnuts to the river, and went back again at night. I went with a great load on my back, for they when they went though but a little way would carry all their trumpery with them. I told them the skin was off my back, but I had no other comforting answer from them than this, that it would be no matter if my head was off too. Wow. 13th Remove. Instead of going towards the bay, which was what I desired, I must go with them, 5 or 6 miles down the river into a mighty thicket of brush, where we abode almost a fortnight. Here one asked me to make a shirt for her papoose, for which she gave me a mess of broth, which was thickened with meal made from the bark of a tree, and to make it better she had put into it about a handful of peas and a few roasted groundnuts. I had not seen my son a pretty while, and here was an Indian of whom I made an inquiry after him, and asked him when he saw him. He answered me that such a time as master roasted him, and that himself did eat a piece of him as big as his 2 fingers, and that he was a very good meat. But the Lord upheld my spirit under this discouragement, and I considered their horrible addictedness to lying, and that there is not one of them that makes the least conscience of speaking the truth. In this place one cold night, as I lay by the fire, I removed a stick which kept the heat from me. A squaw moved it down again, at which I looked up, and she threw a handful of ashes in my eyes. I thought I should have been quite blinded and never have seen more. But lying down, the water ran out of my eyes and carried the dirt with it. That by the morning I recovered my sight again. Yet upon this, and the occasions, I hope it is not too much to say with Fob, have pity upon me, O ye my friends, for the hand of the Lord has touched me. And here I cannot but remember how many times sitting in their wigwams, and musing on things past, I should suddenly leap up and run out as if I had been at home, forgetting where I was and what my condition was. But when I was without and saw nothing but wilderness and woods, and a company of barbarous heathen, my mind quickly returned to me, which made me think of that spoken concerning Samson, who said, I will go out and shake myself as as at other times, but be whiffed, not that the Lord was departed from him. About this time I began to think that all my hopes of restoration would come to nothing. I thought of the English army and hoped for their coming and being retaken by them, but that failed. I hoped to be carried to Albany, as the Indians had discoursed, but that failed also. I thought of being sold to my husband, as my master spake, but instead of that my master himself was gone, and I left behind so that my spirit was now quite ready to sink. I asked them to let me go out and pick up some sticks, that I might get alone, and pour out my heart unto the Lord. Then also I took my Bible to read, but I found no comfort here neither. Yet I can say in all my sorrows and afflictions, God did not leave me to have any impatient work towards himself, as if his ways were unrighteous, but I knew that he laid upon me less than I deserved. Afterward, before this doleful time ended with me, I was turning the leaves of my Bible, and the Lord brought me to some scripture which did a little revive me, as that, Isa 55:8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. And also that Psalm 37:5, commit thy ways unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. About this time they came yelping from Hadley, having there killed 3 Englishmen and brought 1 captive with them, viz., Thomas Reed. They all gathered about the poor man, asking him many questions. I desired also to go and see him, and when I came he was crying bitterly, supposing they would quickly kill him. Whereupon I asked one of them whether they intended to kill him. He answered me they would not. He being a little cheered with that, I asked him about the welfare of my husband. He told me he saw him such a time in the bay, and he was well, but very melancholy. By which I certainly understood, though I suspected it before, that whatsoever the Indians told me respecting him was vanity and lies. Some of them told me he was dead and they had killed him. Some said he was married again, and that the governor wished him to marry, and told him that he should have his choice, and that all persuaded him I was dead. So like were these barbarous creatures to him, who was a liar from the beginning. As I was sitting once in the wigwam here, Philip's maid came with the child in her arms and asked me to give her a piece of my apron to make a flap for it. I told her I would not, then my mistress bid me give it, but I still said no. The maid told me if I would not give her a piece, she would tear a piece off it. I told her I would tear her coat then. With that my mistress rises up and takes up a stick big enough to have killed me, and struck at me with it, but I stepped out, and she struck the stick into the mat of the wigwam. But while she was pulling it out, I ran to the maid and gave her all my apron, and so that storm went over. Hearing that my son was come to this place, I went to see him and told him his father was well, but very melancholy. He told me he was as much grieved for his father as for himself. I wondered at his speech, for I thought I had enough upon my spirit in reference to myself to make me mindless of my husband and everyone else, they being safe among their friends. He told me also that a while before, his master, together with other Indians, were going to the French for powder. But by the way, the Mohawks met with them and killed 4 of their company, which made the rest turn back again, for which I desire that myself and he may ever bless the Lord, for it might have been worse with him. He had been sold to the French than it proved to be in his remaining with the Indians. I went to see an English youth in his place, one, John Gilbert, of Springfield. I found him lying without doors upon the ground. I asked him how he did. He told me he was very sick of a flux with eating so much blood. They had turned him out of the wigwam, and with him an Indian papoose, almost dead, whose parents had been killed in a bitter cold day, without fire or clothes. The young man himself had nothing on but his shirt and waistcoat. This sight was enough to melt a heart of flint. There they lay, quivering in the cold, the youth round like a dog, the papoose stretched out, with the eyes, nose, and mouth full of dirt, and yet alive and groaning. I advised John to go and get to some fire. He told me he could not stand, but I persuaded him still, lest he should lie there and die, and with much ado I got him to a fire and went myself home. As soon as I was got home, his master's daughter came after me to know what I had done with the Englishman. I told her I had got him to a fire in such a place. Now had I need to pray Paul's prayer, 2 Thess. 3:2, that we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men. For her satisfaction I went along with her and brought her to him. But before I got home again it was noised about that I was running away and getting the English youth along with me. As soon as I came in, they began to rant and domineer, asking me where I had been and what I had been doing, and saying they would knock me on the head. I told them I had been seeing the English youth and that I would not run away. They told me I lied, and getting up a hatchet, they came to me and said they would knock me down if I stirred out again, and so confined me to the wigwam. Now may I say with David to Sam 24:14, I am in a great strait. If I keep in, I must die with hunger, and if I go out, I must be knocked on the head. This distressed condition held that day, and half the next, and then the Lord remembered me, whose mercies are great. Then came an Indian to me with a pair of stockings which were too big for him, and he would have me ravel them out and knit them fit for him. I shewed myself willing, and bid him ask my mistress if I might go along with him a little way. She said yes, I might, but I was not a little refreshed with that news that I had my liberty again. Then I went along with him, and he gave me some roasted ground nuts, which did again revive my feeble stomach. Being got out of her sight, I had time and liberty again to look into my Bible, which was my guide by day, and my pillow by night. Now that comfortable scripture presented itself to me, Isa 45:7, for a small moment have I forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. Thus the Lord carried me along from one time to another, and made me good to me this precious promise and many others. Then my son came to see me, and I asked his master to let him stay a while with me, that I might comb his head and look over him, for he was almost overcome with lice. He told me when I had done that he was very hungry, but I had nothing to relieve him, but bid him go into the wigwams as he went along, and see if he could get anything among them, which he did, and it seems tarried a little too long, for his master was angry with him, and beat him, and then sold him. Then he came running to me, and he had a new master, and that he had given him some ground nuts already. Then I went along with him to his new master, who told me he loved him, and he shouted, "Not want." So his master carried him away, and I never saw him afterward, till I saw him at Piscataqua in Portsmouth. That night they bid me go out of the wigwam again. My mistress's papoose was sick, and it died that night, and there was one benefit in it, that there was more room. I went to a wigwam, and they bid me to come in, and gave me a skin to lie upon, and a mess of venison and ground nuts, which was a choice dish among them. On the narrow they buried the papoose, and afterward, both morning and evening, there came a company to mourn and howl with her. Though I confess I could not much condole with them, many sorrowful days I had in this place, often getting alone like a crane or a swallow, so did I chatter. I did mourn as I drove mine eyes fail with looking upward. O Lord, I am oppressed, undertake for me. Isai 38:14. I could tell the Lord as Hezekiah, version 3. Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth. Now had I time to examine all my ways. My conscience did not accuse me of unrighteousness towards one or another, yet I saw how in my walk with God I had been a careless creature. As David said, against thee only have I sinned, and I might say with the poor publican, God be merciful unto me a sinner. Upon the Sabbath days I could look upon the sun and think how people were going to the house of God to have their souls refreshed, and then home and their bodies also, but I was destitute of both, and might say as the poor prodigal, he would fain have filled his belly with the busks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. Luke 15:16. For I must say with him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight. Version 21. Verse. Gosh. I remember how on the night before and after the Sabbath, when my family was about me and relations and neighbors with us, we could pray and sing and refresh our bodies with the good creatures of God, and then have a comfortable bed to lie down on. But instead of all this, I had only a little swill for the body, and then like a swine must lie down on the ground. I cannot express to man the sorrow that lay upon my spirit, the Lord knows it. Yet that comfortable scripture would often come to my mind, for a small moment have I forsaken me, but with great mercies will I gather thee. The 14th Remove. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, Now must we pack up and be gone from this thicket, bending our course toward the bay towns. I have nothing to eat by the way this day, but a few crumbs of cake that an Indian gave my girl, the same day we were taken. She gave it to me, and I put it into my pocket. There it lay, till it was so mouldy for want of good bacon that one could not tell what it was made of. It fell all into crumbs and grew so dry and hard that it was like little flints, and this refreshed me many times, when I was ready to faint. It was in my thoughts when I put it into my mouth that if ever I returned I would tell the world what a blessing the Lord gave to such mean food. As we went along, they killed a deer with a young one. They gave me a piece of the fawn, and it was so young and tender that one might eat those bones as well as the flesh, and yet I thought it was very good. When night came on, we sat down. It rained, but they quickly got up a bark wigman, where I lay dry and night. I looked out in the morning, and many of them had lain in the rain all night. I saw by their reeking thus the Lord dealt mercifully with me many times, and I fared better than many of them. In the morning they took the blood of the deer and put it into the paunch, and so boiled it. I could eat nothing of that, though they eat it sweetly, and yet they were so nice in other things that when I... Can I help you? In the morning they took the blood of the deer and put it into the paunch, and so boiled it. I could eat nothing of that, though they eat it sweetly, and yet they were so nice in other things that when I had fetched water and had put the dish, I dipped the water into the kettle of water which I brought, they would say they would knock me down, for they said it was sluttish trick. The 15th Remove. We went on our travel, I having gotten handful of ground nuts for my support that day. They gave me my load, and I went on cheerfully, with the thoughts of going homeward, having my burthen more upon my back than my spirit. We came to Buckog River again that day, near which we abode a few days. Sometimes one of them would give me a pipe, another a little tobacco, another a little salt, which I would change for victuals. I cannot but think what a wolfish appetite persons have in a starving condition, for many times when they gave me that which was hot, I was so greedy that I should burn my mouth, that it would trouble me many hours after, and yet I should quickly do the like again. And after I was thoroughly hungry, I was never again satisfied. For though it sometimes fell out that I had got enough, and did eat till I could eat no more, yet I was as unsatisfied as I was when I began. And now could I see that Scripture verified, there being many Scriptures that we do not take notice of, or understand till we are afflicted. Mick 6:14, Thou shalt eat, and not be satisfied. Now might I see more than ever before the miseries that sin hath brought upon us. Many times I should be ready to run out against the heathen, but that Scripture would quiet me again. Amos 3:6, Shall there be evil in the city, and the Lord hath not done it? The Lord help me to make a right improvement of his word, and that I might learn that grand lesson. Mick 6:8-9, He hath shewed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with thy God. Hear ye the road, and who hath appointed it? The 16th Remove. See what else I can do. Oh, we began this remove by wading over the Bacog River. The water was up to our knees, and the stream was very swift and so cold that I thought it would have caught me in the sunder. I was so weak and feeble that I reeled as I went along, and thought that I must end my days at last after my bearing and getting through so many difficulties. The Indians stood laughing to see me staggering along, but in my distress the Lord gave me experience of the truth and goodness of that promise. Isa 43:2. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee. Then I sat down to put on my stockings and shoes, with the tears running down my eyes and many sorrowful thoughts in my heart. But I got up to go along with him. Quickly there came to us an Indian, informed them I must go to my master, for there was a letter come from the camp of Sagamata about redeeming the captives, and that there would be another in 14 days, and that I must be there ready. My heart was so heavy before that I could scarce speak or go in the path, and yet now so light that I could run. Hold on, I'm taking a video. I'm recording a video. My heart was so heavy before that I could scarce speak or go in the path, and yet now so light that I could run. My strength seemed to come again, and to recruit my feeble knees and aching heart, yet it pleased them to go but 1 mile that night, and there we stayed 2 days. In that time came a company of Indians to us, near 30, all on horseback. My heart skipped within me, thinking they had been Englishmen at the first sight of them, for they were dressed in English apparel, with hats, white necklocks, and sashes about their waists, and ribbons upon their shoulders. But when they came near, there was a vast difference between the lovely faces of Christians and the foul looks of the heathen, which much damped my spirits again. The 17th Remove. A comfortable remove it was to me because of my hopes. They gave me my pack, and along we went cheerfully, but quickly we were proved more than my strength. Having a little or no refreshment, my strength failed, and my spirits were almost quite gone. Now may I say, as David's Psalm 109, 22, 23, 24, I am poor and needy, and my heart is wounded within me. I am gone like the shadow when it declined. I am tossed up and down like the locust. My knees are weak through fasting, and my flesh faileth faint. At night we came to an Indian town, and the Indians sat down by a weak man discoursing, but I was almost spent and could scarce speak. I laid down my load and went into the wigwam, and there sat an Indian boiling of horse-feet, they being wont to eat the flesh first, and when the feet were old and dried, and they had nothing else, they would cut off the feet and use them. I asked him to give me a little of this broth, or whatever they were boiling in. He took a dish and gave me 1 spoonful of samp, and bid me take as much of the broth as I would. Then I put some of the hot water to the samp and drank it up, and my spirits came again. He gave me also a piece of the ruffler, ridding of the small guts, and I broiled it on the coals, and now I may say that with Jonathan, see, I pray you, how mine eyes are enlightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. 1 Sam 14:20. Now is my spirit revived again, though means be never so inconsiderable, yet if the Lord bestow his blessing upon them, they shall refresh both soul and body. The 18th Remove. We took up our packs and along we went, but a wearisome day ahead of it. As we went along, I saw an Englishman stripped naked and lying dead upon the ground, but knew not who he was. Then we came to another Indian town. where we stayed all night. In this town, there were 4 English children captives, and one of them my own sister's. I went to see how she did, and she was well, considering her captive condition. I would have tarried that night with her, but they that owned her would not suffer. Then I went to another wigman where they were boiling corn and beans, which was a lovely sight to see, but I could not get a taste thereof. Then I went into another wigwam, where there were 2 of the English children. The squaw was boiling horses' feet. She cut me off a little piece and gave me one of the English children a piece also. Being very hungry, I had quickly eat up mine, but the child could not bite it. It was so tough and sinewy, but lay sucking, gnawing, and slabbering of it in the mouth and hand, that I took it of the child and eat it myself, and savory it was to my taste, that I may say as Job chap 6:7, the things that my soul refuseth to touch are as sorrowful meat. Thus the Lord made that pleasant and refreshing, which another time would have been an abomination. Then I went home to my mistress's wigwam, and they told me I disgraced my master with begging, and if I did so any more they would knock me on the head. I told them they had as good do that as starve me to death. The 19th Remove. They said when we went out that we must travel to Wachusett this day, but a bitter weary day I had of it, travelling now 3 days together without resting any day between. At last, after many weary steps, I saw Wachusett hills, but many miles off. Then we came to a great swamp, through which we travelled up to our knees in mud and water, which was heavy going to one tired before. Being almost spent, I thought I should have sunk down at last and never got out, but I may say as in Psalm 94:18, when my foot slipped, thy mercy, O Lord, held me up. Going along, having indeed my life but little spirit, Philip, who was in the company, came up and took me by the hand and said, 2 weeks more and you shall be mistress again. I asked him if he spake true. He answered, Yes, and quickly you shall come to your master again, who had been gone from us 3 weeks. After many weary steps we came to Wachusett, where he was, and glad was I to see him. He asked me when I washed me. I told him not this month. Then he fetched me some water himself, and bid me wash, and gave me a glass to see how I looked, and bid his squaw give me something to eat. So she gave me a mess of beans and meat, and a little ground-nut cake. I was wonderfully revived with this favour shewed me. Psalm 146. He made them also to be pitied of all those that carried them away captive. My master had 3 squaws, living sometimes with one and sometimes with another. Onux, this old squaw at whose wigwam I was, and with whom my master had been these 3 weeks. Another was Weddymore, with whom I had lived and served all this while. A severe and proud dame she was, bestowing every day in dressing herself near as much time as any of the gentry of the land, powdering her hair and painting her face, going with her necklaces with jewels in her ears and bracelets upon her hands. When she had dressed herself, her work was to make girdles of wampum and beads. The 3rd squaw was a younger one, by whom he had 2 papooses. By that time I was so refreshed by the old squaw, Wettimore's maid came to call me home, at which I fell a-weeping. Then the old squaw told me to encourage me, that when I wanted victuals, I should come to her, and that I should lie in her wigwam. Then I went with the maid, and quickly I came back and lodged there. The squaw laid a mat under me and a good rug over me, the first time that I had any such kindness shewed me. I understood that Weddymore thought that if she should let me go and serve with the old squaw, she should be in danger to lose not only my service, but the redemption pay also. And I was not a little glad to hear this, being by it raised in my hopes that in God's due time there would be an end of this sorrowful hour. Then came an Indian and asked me to knit him 3 pairs of stockings for which I had hat and a silk handkerchief. Then another asked me to make her a shift for which she gave me an apron. Then came Tom and Peter with the second letter from the council about the captives. Though they were Indians, I knew them by the hand, and burst out into tears. My heart was so full that I could not speak to them. By recovering myself, I asked them how my husband did, and all my friends and acquaintances. They said they were well, but very melancholy. They brought me 2 briskets and a pound of tobacco. The tobacco I soon gave away. When it was all gone, one asked me to give him a pipe of tobacco. I told him it was all gone. Then he began to rant and threaten. I told him when my husband came I would give him some. "Hang him, rogue," says he. "I will knock out his brains if he comes here." And then another, and then again, at the same breath, they would say that if there should come 100 without guns, they would do them no hurt. So unstable and like madmen they were, so that fearing the worst I durst not send to my husband, though there was some thoughts of his coming to redeem and fetch me, not knowing what might follow, for there was but little more trust to them than to the master they served. When the letter was come, the Sagamos met to consult about the captives, and called me to them to inquire how much my husband would give to redeem me. When I came, I sat down among them, as I was wont to do, as their manner is. Then they bid me stand up, and said they were the general court. They bid me speak what I thought he would give. Now, knowing that all that we had was destroyed by the Indians, I was in a great strait. I thought if I should speak but a little, it would be slighted and hinder the matter. If of a great sum, I knew not where it would be procured, yet at a venture I said 20 pounds, yet desired them to take less. But they would not hear of that, but sent that message to Boston, that for 20 pounds I should be redeemed. It was a praying Indian that wrote their letters for them. There was another praying Indian who told me that he had a brother that would not eat horse. His conscience was so tender and scrupulous, though as large as hell, for the destruction of poor Christians. Then he said he read that scripture to him. 2 Kings 6:25. There was a famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until oh my God. So sorry. There was a famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 40 pieces of silver, and the 4th part of a cabin dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. He expounded this place to his brother, and shewed him that it was lawful to eat that in a famine, which it is not in another time, and now says he will eat horse with any Indian of them all. There was another praying Indian who, when he had done all the mischief that he could, betrayed his own father into the English hands, thereby to purchase his own life. Another praying Indian was at Sudbury fight, though as he deserved, he was afterwards hanged for it. There was another praying Indian so wicked and cruel as to wear a string about his neck, strung with Christian fingers. Wow, ew. Another praying Indian, when they went to Sudbury fight, went with them, and his squaw also with him, with her papoose at her back. Before they went to that fight, they got a company together to powwow. The manner was as followeth. There was one that kneeled upon a deerskin with that company round him in a ring, who kneeled striking upon the ground with their hands and with sticks, and muttering or humming with their mouths. Beside him who kneeled in the ring, there also stood one with a gun in his hand. Then he on the deerskin made a speech, and all manifested assent to it, and so they did many times together. Then they bid him with a gun go out of the ring, which he did, but when he was out they called him in again, but he seemed to make a stand. Then they called the more earnestly, till he turned again. Then they all sang. Then they gave him 2 guns, in each hand one, and so he on the deerskin began again. And at the end of every sentence in his speaking, they all assented, and humming or muttering with their mouths and striking upon the ground with their hands. Then they bid him with the 2 guns go out of the ring again, which he did a little way. Then they called him again, but he made a stand, so they called him with greater earnestness. But he stood reeling and wavering, as if he knew not whether he should stand or fall, or which way to go. Then they called him with exceeding great vehemency, all of them, one and another. After a little while he turned in staggering as he went, with his arms stretched out in each hand a gun. As soon as he came in, they all sang and rejoiced exceedingly a while, and then he upon the deerskin made another speech, unto which they all assented in a rejoicing manner. And so they ended their business, and forthwith went to Sudbury fight. To my thinking, they went without any scruple, but that they should prosper and again the victory. And they went out not so rejoicing, but they came home with as great a victory. For they said they killed 2 captains and almost 100 men. 1 Englishman they brought alive with them, and he said it was too true, for they had made sad work at Sudbury, as indeed it proved. Yet they came home without that rejoicing and triumphing over their victory, which they were wont to shew at other times, but rather like dogs, as they say, which have lost their ears. Yet I could not perceive that it was for their own loss of men. They said they lost not above 5 or 6, and I missed none except in 1 wigwam. When they want, they act as if the devil had told them that they should gain the victory, and now they acted as if the devil had told them they should have a fall. Whether it were so or no, I cannot tell, but so it proved, for they quickly began to fall, and so held on that summer till they came to utter ruin. They came home on a Sabbath day, and the Pawa that kneeled upon the deerskin came home, I may say without any abuse, as black as the devil. When my master came home, he came to me and bid me make a shirt for his papoose of a Holland-laced pillow beer. About that time there came an Indian to me, and bid me to come to his wigwam at night, and he would give me some pork and groundnuts. Which I did, and as I was eating, another Indian said to me, "He seems to be your good friend, but he killed 2 Englishmen at Sudbury, and there lie the clothes behind you." I looked behind me, and there I saw bloody clothes, with bullet holes in them. Yet the Lord suffered not this wretch to do me any hurt, yet instead of that he many times refreshed me. 5 or 6 times did he and his squaw refresh my feeble carcase. If I went to their wigwam at any time, they would always give me something, and yet they were strangers that I never saw before. Another squaw gave me a piece of fresh pork and a little salt with it, and I lent me her frying pan to fry it, and I cannot but remember what a sweet, pleasant, and delightful relish that bit had to me to this day. So little do we prize common mercies when we have them to the full. The 20th Remove. It was their usual manner to remove when they had done any mischief, lest they should be found out, and so they did at this time. We went about 3 or 4 miles, and there they built a great wigwam, big enough to hold 100 Indians, which they did in preparation to a great day of dancing. They would now say among themselves that the governor would be so angry for his loss at Sudbury that he would send no more about the captives, which made me grieve and tremble. My sister being not far from this place, and hearing that I was here, desired her master to let her come and see me, and he was willing to it, and would come with her, but she being ready first, told him she would go before, and was come within a mile or 2 of the place. Then he overtook her and began to rant as if he had been mad, and made her go back again in the rain, so that I never saw her till I saw her in Charlestown, but the Lord requited many of their ill doings, for this Indian, her master, has hanged afterward at Boston. They began now to come from all quarters against their mercy dancing day. Amongst some of them come one good wife Kettle. I told her my heart was so heavy that it was ready to break. So is mine too, she said. But yet I hope we shall hear some good news shortly. I could hear how earnestly my sister desired to see me, and I earnestly desired to see her, yet neither of us could get an opportunity. My daughter was now but a mile off, and I had not seen her for 9 or 10 weeks, as I had not seen my sister since our first taking. I desired them to let me go and see them. Yea, I entreated, begged, and persuaded them to let me see my daughter, and yet so hard-hearted were they that they would not suffer it. They made use of their tyrannical power whilst they had it, but through the Lord's wonderful mercy their time was now but short. On a Sabbath day, the sun being about an hour high in the afternoon, came Mr. John Hoare, the council permitting him, and his own forward spirit inclining him, together with the 2 forementioned Indians, Tom and Peter, with the 3rd letter from the council. When they came near, I was abroad. They presently called me in and bid me sit down and not stir. Then they catched up their guns and away they ran, as if an enemy had been at hand, and the guns went off apace. I manifested some great trouble. I'm recording my voice.
Huh?
I'm recording my voice.
Oh, okay.
For no reason. You can take this.
That's it.
Take this. Okay. Anyways, when they came near, I was abroad. They presently called me in and bid me sit down and not stir. Then they catched up their guns and away they ran, as if an enemy had been at hand, and the guns went off apace. I manifested some great trouble and asked them what was the matter. I told them I thought they had killed the Englishmen, for they had in the meantime they told me that an Englishman was to come. They said no, they shot over his horse and under and before his horse, and they pushed him this way and that way at their pleasure, shewing what they could do. Then they let him come to their wigwams. I begged of them to let me see the Englishmen, but they would not. But there was I fain to sit their pleasure. When they had talked their fill with him, they suffered me to go to him. We asked each other of our welfare, and how my husband did, and all my friends. He told me they were all well, and would be glad to see me. Among other things which my husband sent me, there came a pound of tobacco, which I sold for 9 shillings in money, for many of them, for want of tobacco, smoked hemlock and ground ivy. It was a great mistake in any who thought I sent for tobacco, for though the favor of God, that desire was overcome. I now asked them whether I should go home with Mr. Hoare. They answered no, one and another of them, and it being late, we lay down with that answer. In the morning, Mr. Hoare invited the Sagamores to dinner, but when we went to get it ready, we found they had stolen the greatest part of the provision Mr. Hoare had brought. And we may see the wonderful power of God in that one passage, in that when there was such a number of them together and so greedy of a little good food, and no English there but Mr. Hoare and myself, that it was a wonder they did not knock us on the head and take what we had, there being not only some provision but also trading cloth, a part of the 20 pounds agreed upon. But instead of doing us any mischief, they seemed to be ashamed of the fact, and said it was the Matchet Indians that did it. Oh, that we could believe that there was nothing too hard for God. God shewed his power over the heathen in this, as he did over the hungry lions when Daniel was cast into the den. Mr. Hoare called them bedtime to dinner, But they eat but little, they being so busy in dressing themselves and getting ready for their dance, which was carried on by 8 of them, 4 men and 4 squaws, my master and mistress being 2. He was dressed in his holland shirt, with great stockings, his garters hung around with shillings, and had girdles of wampum upon his head and shoulders. She had a kersey coat covered with girdles of wampum from the lions upward. Her arms from her elbows to her hands were covered with bracelets. There were handfuls of necklaces around her neck, and several sorts of jewels in her ears. She had fine red stockings and white shoes, her hair powdered, and her face painted red. That was always before black. And all of the dancers were after the same manner. There were 2 others singing and knocking on a kettle for their music. They kept hopping up and down one after another, with a kettle of water in the midst, standing warm upon some embers, to drink of when they were dry. They held on till almost night, throwing out wampum to the standers by. At night I asked them again if I should go home. They all as one said no, except my husband would come for me. When we were lain down, my master went out of the wigwam, and by sent in an Indian called James the printer, who told Mr. Hoare that my master would let me go home tomorrow, if he would let him have 1 pint of liquor. Then Mr. Hoare called his own Indians, Tom and Peter, and bid them all go and see if he would promise it before them 3, and if he would, he should have it, which he did and had it. Philip, smelling the business, called me to him and asked me what I would give him, to tell me some good news and to speak a good word for me, that I might go home tomorrow. I told him I could not tell what to give him. I would anything I had, and asked him what he would have. He said 2 coats and 20 shillings in money, half a bushel of seed corn, and some tobacco. I thanked him for his love, but I knew that good news as well as that crafty fox. My master, after he had his drink, quickly came ranting into the wigwam again, and called for Mr. Hoare, drinking to him, and saying he was a good man, and then again he would say, "Hang him a rogue." Being almost drunk, he would drink to him, and yet presently say he should be hanged. Then he called for me. I trembled to hear him, and yet I was fain to go to him, and he drank to me, shewing no incivility. He was the first Indian I saw drunk. All the time I was among them. At last his squaw ran out, and he after her ran round the wigwam, with his money jingling at his knees, but she escaped him. But having an old squaw, he ran to her, and so through the Lord's mercy we were no more troubled with him that night. Yet I had not a comfortable night's rest, for I think I can say I did not sleep for 3 nights together. The night before the letter came from the council I could not rest. I was so full of fears and troubles. Yet at this time I could not rest night nor day. The next night I was overjoyed, Mr. Hoare being come, and that with such good tidings. The 3rd night I was even swallowed up with the thoughts of going home again, and that I must leave my children behind me in the wilderness, so that sleep was now almost departed from mine eyes. On Tuesday morning they called their general court, as they styled it, to consult and determine whether I should go home or no. And they all seemingly consented that I should go, except Philip, who would not come among them. But before I go any farther, I would take leave to mention a few remarkable passages of Providence which I took special notice of in my afflicted time. Of the fair opportunity 1. Of the fair opportunity lost in the long march, a little after the fort fight, when our English army was so numerous and in pursuit of the enemy, and so near as to overtake several and destroy them, and the enemy in such distress for food that our men might track them by their rooting the ground for groundnuts, whilst they were flying for their lives. I say that then our army should want provisions, and be obliged to leave their pursuit and return homeward. And the very next week the enemy came upon our town like bears bereft of their whelps, or so many ravenous wolves rending us and our lambs to death. But what shall I say? God seemed to leave his people to themselves, and ordered all things for his own holy hands. Shall there be evil in the city, and the Lord hath not done it? They are not grieved for the affliction of Joseph. Therefore they shall go captive, with this first that go captive. It is the Lord's doing, and it should be marvelous in our eyes. 2. I cannot but remember how the Indians derided the slowness and the dullness of the English army in its setting out. For after the desolations at Lancaster and Medfield, as I went along with them, they asked me when I thought the English army would come after them. I told them I could not tell. It may be they will come in May, said they. Thus they did scoff at us, as if the English would be a quarter of a year getting ready. 3. Which also I have hinted before, when the English army with new supplies were sent forth to pursue after the enemy, and they understanding it fled before them till they came to Bacog river, where they forthwith went over safely, that the river should be impassable to the English. I cannot but admire to see the wonderful providence of God in preserving the heathen for further affliction to our poor country. They could go in great numbers over, but the English must stop. God had an overruling hand in all those things. 4. It was thought, if their corn was cut down, they would starve and die with hunger, and all that could be found was destroyed, and they, driven from that little they had in store, into the woods in the midst of the winter, and yet how do admiration did the Lord preserve them for his holy ends and the destruction of many still among the English. Strangely did the Lord provide for them, that I did not see all the time I was among them. One man, woman, or child die with hunger, though many times they would eat that a hog or a dog would hardly touch, yet by that God strengthened them to be a scourge to his people. Their chief and commonest food was ground nuts. They eat also nuts and acorns, artichokes, lily roots, ground beans, and several other weeds and roots that I know not. They would pick up old bones and cut them into pieces at the joints, and if they were full of worms and maggots, they would scald them over the fire to make the vermin come out, and then boil them and drink up the liquor, and then beat the great ends of them in a mortar, and so eat them. They would eat horses' guts and ears and all sorts of wild birds they could catch, also bear, venison, beavers, tortoise, frogs, squirrels, dogs, skunks, rattlesnakes, the very bark of trees, besides all sorts of creatures and provision which they plundered from the English. I can but stand in admiration to see the wonderful power of God in providing for such a vast number of our enemies in the wilderness, where there was nothing to be seen but from hand to mouth. Many times in the morning the generality of them would eat up all they had, and yet have some farther supply against they wanted. But now our preserve and evil carriages in the sight of the Lord have so offended him, that instead of turning his hand against them, the Lord feeds and nourishes them up to the scourge to the whole land. 5. Another thing that I would observe is the strange providence of God in turning things about when the Indians were at the highest and the English at the lowest. I was with the enemy 11 weeks and 5 days, and not 1 week passed with their fury and some desolation by fire or sword upon one place or other. They mourned for their own losses, yet triumphed and rejoiced in their inhuman and devilish cruelty to the English. They would boast much of their victories, saying that in 2 hours' time they had destroyed such a captain and his company, in such a place, and such a captain and his company, in such a place, and boast how many towns they had destroyed, and then scoff and say they had done them a good turn to send them to heaven so soon. Again, they would say, this summer they would knock all the rogues on the head, or drive them into the sea, or make them fly the country, thinking surely, Agag-like, the bitter nifs of death is past. Now the heathen begin to think all is their own, and the poor Christians' hopes fail as to man, and now their eyes are more to God, and their hearts sigh heavenward, and they say in good earnest, help, Lord, or we perish. When the Lord had brought his people to this, that they saw no help in anything but himself, then he takes the quarrel into his own hand, and though they had made a pit as deep as hell for the Christians that summer, yet the Lord hurled themselves into it, and the Lord had not so many ways before to preserve them, but now he hath so many to destroy them. But to return again to my going home, where we may see a remarkable change of providence. At my first, they were all against it, except my husband would come for me, but afterward they assented to it, and seemed to rejoice in it. Some asking me to send them some bread, others some tobacco, others shaking me by the hand, offering me a hood and scarf to ride in, not one moving hand or tongue against it. Thus hath the Lord answered my poor desires, and the many earnest requests of others put up unto God for me. In my travels, an Indian came to me, and told me, if I were willing, he and his squaw would run away, and go home along with me. I told them no, I was not willing to run away, but desired to wait God's time, that I might go home quietly, and without fear. And now God hath granted me my desire. Oh, the wonderful power of God that I have seen, and the experiences that I have had. I have been in the midst of those roaring lions and savage bears that feared neither God nor man nor the devil by night and day, alone in company, sleeping all sorts together, and yet not one of them ever offered me the least abuse of unchastity to me, in word or action. Though some are ready to say, I speak it for my own credit, but I speak it in the presence of God and to his glory. God's power is as great now as it was to save Daniel in the lion's den, or the 3 children in the fiery furnace, especially that I should come away in the midst of so many hundreds of enemies, and not a dog move his tongue. So I took my leave of them, and in coming along my heart melted into tears, more than all the while I was with them, and I was almost swallowed up with the thoughts that ever I should go home again. About the sun's going down, Mr. Hoare, myself, and the 2 Indians came to Lanchester, and a solemn sight it was to me. There had I lived many comfortable years among my relations and neighbors, and now not one Christian to be seen, or one house left standing. We went on to a farmhouse that was yet standing, where we lay all night, and a comfortable lodging we had, though nothing but straw to lie on. The Lord preserved us in safety that night, and raised us up again in the morning, and carried us along that before noon we came to Concord. Now was I full of joy, and yet not without sorrow, joy to see such a lovely sight. So many Christians together, and some of them my neighbors. There I met with my brother and my brother-in-law, who asked me if I knew where his wife was. Poor heart! He had helped me to bury her and knew it not. She, being shot down by the house, was partly burnt, so that those who were at Boston at the desolation of town came back afterward and buried the dead. Did not know her. Yet I was not without sorrow to think how many were looking and longing, and my own children among the rest, to enjoy that deliverance that I had now received, and I did not know whether ever I should see them again. Being recruited with food and raiment, we went to Boston that day, where I met with my dear husband, but the thoughts of our dear children, one being dead and the other we could not tell where, abated our comfort in each other. I was not before so much hemmed in by the merciless and cruel heathen, but now as much with pitiful, tender-hearted, and compassionate Christians. In that poor and beggarly condition I was received in. I was kindly entertained in several houses, so much love I received from several, many of whom I knew not, that I am not capable to declare it, but the Lord knows them all by name. The Lord reward them sevenfold into their blossoms of his spirituals, for their temporals. The 20 pounds, the price of my redemption, was raised by some Boston gentlewoman and Mr. Usher, whose bounty and charity I would not forget to make mention of. Then Mr. Thomas Shepherd of Charlestown received us into his house, where we continued 11 weeks, and a father and mother they were unto us. And many more tender-hearted friends we met with in that place. We were now in the midst of love, yet not without much and frequent heaviness of heart for our poor children and other relations who were still in affliction. The week following after my coming in, the governor had counsel sent to the Indians again, and that not without success, for they brought in my sister and good wife Kettle. Their not knowing where our children were a sore trial to us still, and yet we were not without secret hopes of seeing them again. That which was dead lay heavier upon my spirits than those which were alive among the heathens. thinking how it suffered with its wounds, and I was not able to relieve it, and how it was buried by the heathen in the wilderness from among all Christians. We were hurried up and down in our thoughts. Sometimes we should hear a report that they were gone this way, and sometimes that, and that they were come in this place or that. We kept inquiring and listening to hear concerning them, but no certain news yet. About this time, the council had ordered a day of public thanksgiving. Though I had still cause of mourning, and being unsettled in our minds, we thought we would ride eastward to see if we could hear anything concerning our children. As we were riding along between Ipswich and Rowley, we met with William Hubbard, who told us our son Joseph and my sister's son were come into Major Waldron's. I asked him how he knew it. He said the Major himself told him so. So along we went till we came to Newbury, and their minister being absent, they desired my husband to preach the thanksgiving for them. But he was not willing to stay there that night, but he would go over to Salisbury to hear father, and come again in the morning, in which he did, and preach there that day. At night, when he had done, one came and told him that his daughter was come into Providence. Here was mercy on both hands. Now we were between them, the one on the east, and the other one on the west. Our son being nearest, we went to him first, to Portsmouth, where we met with him and with the Major also, who told us he had done what he could, but could not redeem him under £7, which the good people thereabouts were pleased to pay. The Lord reward the Major and all the rest, though unknown to me, for their labor of love. My sister's son was redeemed for £4, which the council gave order for the payment of. Having now received one of our children, we hastened toward the other. Going back through Newbury, my husband preached there on the Sabbath day, for which they rewarded him manifold. On Monday we came to Charlestown, where we heard that the governor of Rhode Island had sent over our daughter to take care of her, being now within his jurisdiction, which should not pass without our acknowledgments. But she being nearer Rehoboth than Rhode Island, Mr. Newman went over and took care of her, and brought her to his own house. And the goodness of God was admirable to us in our low estate, in that he raised up compassionate friends on every side when we had nothing to recompense any for their love. The Indians were now gone that way, that it was apprehended dangerous to go to her. But the carts which carried provision to the English army, being guarded, brought her with them to Dorchester, where we received her safe. Blessed be the Lord for it. Her coming in was after this manner. She was traveling one day with the Indians, with her basket at her back. The company of Indians were got before her, and gone out of sight, all except one squaw. She followed the squaw till night, and then both of them lay down, having nothing over them but the heavens, nor under them but the earth. Thus she traveled 3 days together, having nothing to eat or drink but water and green hurtleberries. At last they came into Providence, where she was kindly entertained by several of that town. The Indians often said that I should never have her under £20, but now the Lord hath brought her in upon free cost, and given her to me the second time. The Lord make us a blessing indeed to each other. Thus hath the Lord brought me and mine out of that horrible pit, and hath set us in the midst of tender-hearted and compassionate Christians. 'Tis the desire of my soul that we may walk worthy of the mercies received, and which we are receiving. Our family being now gathered together, the South Church in Boston hired an house for us. Then we removed from Mr. Shepherd's, those cordial friends, and went to Boston, where we continued about 3/4 of a year. Still the Lord went along with us, and provided us graciously for us. I thought it somewhat strange to set up housekeeping with bare walls, but as Solomon says, money answers all things, and that we had, through the benevolence of Christian friends, some in this town and some in that, and some from England, that in a little time we might look and see the house furnished with love. The Lord hath been exceeding good to us in our low estate, in that when we had neither house nor home, nor other necessaries, the Lord so moved the hearts of these and those toward us, that we wanted neither food nor raiment for ourselves or ours. Prov 18:24. There is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And how many such friends have we found and now living among us? And truly such a friend have we found him to be unto us, and in whose house we lived, viz. Mr. James Whitcomb, a friend near hand and far off. I can remember the time when I used to sleep quietly without working in my thoughts whole nights together, but now it is otherwise with me. When all are fast about me and no eye open but his, who ever awaketh my thoughts are upon things past, upon the awful dispensions of the Lord towards us, upon his wonderful power and might in carrying of us through so many difficulties, in returning us in safety, and suffering none to hurt us. I remember in the night season how the other day I was in the midst of thousands of enemies and nothing but death before me. It was then hard to work to persuade myself that ever I should be satisfied with bread again. But now we are fed with the finest of the wheat, and as I may say, with honey out of the rock. Instead of the husks we have the fat calf. The thoughts of these things and the particulars of them, and of the love and goodness of God.
Where do you go?
Towards us.
Hey, I thought you wanted it.
The thoughts of these things and the particulars of them, and of the love and goodness of God towards us, make it true of me what David said of himself. Psalm 6:6. I water my couch with my tears. Oh, the wonderful power of God that mine eyes have seen, affording matter enough for my thoughts to run in, that when others are sleeping, mine eyes are weeping. I have seen the extreme vanity of this world. 1 hour I have been in health and wealth, wanting nothing, but the next hour in sickness and wounds and death, and having nothing but sorrow and affliction. Before I knew what affliction meant, I was ready sometimes to wish for it. When I lived in prosperity, having the comforts of this world about me, my relations by me, and my heart cheerful, and taking little care for anything, and yet seeing many, whom I preferred before myself, under many trials and afflictions, and sickness, weakness, poverty, losses, crosses, and cares of the world, I should be sometimes jealous lest I should have my portion in this life. But now I see the Lord at this time to scourge and chasten me. The portion of some is to have their affliction by drops, but the wine of astonishment, like a sweeping rain, that leaveth no food, did the Lord prepare to be in my portion. Affliction I wanted, and affliction I had full measure, pressed down and running over, yet I see when God calls persons to never so many difficulties, yet he is able to carry them through, and make them say they have been gainers thereby. And I hope I can say in some measure as David, it is good for me that I have been afflicted. The Lord hath shewed me the vanity of these outward things, that they are the vanities of vanities, and vexation of spirit. That they are but a shadow, a blast, a bubble, and things of no continuance. If trouble from smaller matter began to rise in me, I have something at hand to check myself with, and say, why am I troubled? It was but the other day that if I had had the world, I would have given it for my freedom, or to have been a servant to a Christian. I have learned to look beyond present and smaller troubles, and to be quieted under them, as Moses said, Exodus 14:13, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. The end. Oh, how my throat hurts. Okay, hope this was hope this was beneficial to somebody at least. If you want to see this, I'm just gonna scroll through from the narrative all the way to 8. If you're interested in taking screenshots or something to read the rest. I don't know how many people have access to this. Ah, 2nd thought, this is taking longer than I thought. I don't even know if I'm gonna do anything with this video, but if I do post it somewhere, YouTube, and you've watched this far, which I find to be very unlikely, leave a comment letting me know that you actually watched the whole video. That would be pretty cool. I would really appreciate that. And I would feel like this made a difference because this took a lot of my time and I had to read it anyway, so it doesn't matter. And if you want more of these, let me know. If there's anything else that you might request, please let me know. Let me know. Give me feedback. I love feedback. If there's a story you want read, totally. If you think I'm annoying, if you think my voice is annoying, if you think the accents were stupid, I don't know, just let me know. Lucky you, you get to fast forward through this or skip through this video. I have to sit here and make it. Yeah, that's right. Why am I doing this? If this is posted and me scrolling through this like this actually served to benefit anybody at all, please let me know, because I would like to know if this actually was worth doing. This whole video was worth doing too, actually. That would be, yeah, just let me know. Thank you. I'm sorry for all the interruptions. And we have reached the end. Thank you for watching, and I don't know if I'll ever do this again, but thank you. Bye.